Okay, picture this. Your team is running ChatGPT for writing. They're using Copilot for emails. Somebody else has a completely different tool for meeting transcripts. And then there's a fourth app you're paying for just to handle scheduling. You've got four tools, four different logins, four entirely separate data sets going somewhere you probably haven't even checked. And at the end of the day, you are still the one acting as the human glue, trying to connect all those dots together. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to look at a fundamental category mistake that most businesses are making right now and what you actually need to be building instead. It's an incredibly relatable trap, right? I mean, the appeal of AI is obvious, and the pressure from boards and competitors to adopt it is immense. Teams love these tools because, honestly, they genuinely do save time. You run a quick pilot, it looks great, and suddenly the pressure builds to scale it up. But almost overnight, you're not just adopting technology anymore. You're managing this chaotic sprawl of isolated applications. The headache here isn't just about managing a bunch of subscriptions. It's about the fact that your team is acting as the exhausted integration layer for a totally fragmented system. And honestly, this brings us to the core issue. The fundamental mistake happening in Australian professional services, legal firms, and accounting practices today is that businesses are collecting standalone AI tools when what they actually need is an AI operating system. The gap between these two things? It really isn't about technical complexity. It is entirely about whether AI is just a neat feature your team uses or a secure, governed function that your entire business runs on. Let's get into Section 1, the AI tool trap. See, the rush for immediate productivity gains is creating a surprisingly risky environment. When you adopt AI tool by tool and team by team, the risks don't announce themselves with a massive crash. Instead, they compound quietly. The first hidden cost is data exposure. A lot of businesses don't realize that pasting a client brief into a public AI interface might literally mean consenting to data retention terms you'd never normally accept. Then you have compliance drift. If an AI generates advice or summarizes a contract, but there's no audit trail of who reviewed it or what the inputs were, you've got a major gap in accountability. And finally, you get operational fragility. You just end up with this patchwork of tools that is incredibly difficult to govern, pretty much impossible to scale cleanly, and really expensive to untangle later. To put this into perspective, imagine trying to build a house. Collecting individual AI tools is exactly like going to the hardware store and buying the absolute best power tools you can find. You know, a great drill, a fantastic saw, but then you just leave them scattered on the grass. An AI operating system, on the other hand, is like hiring a construction crew with a project manager who actually knows the whole blueprint. One is just a collection of disconnected parts. The other? That's operational infrastructure. Which brings us to Section 2. What actually is an AIOS? If we want to move past those scattered power tools, what does that construction crew actually look like in software? Well, an AI operating system is infrastructure that coordinates agents, data, decisions, and workflows across the entire business. Let's break down the 5 core components that make an OS entirely different from just a standalone tool. First up is persistent memory. You know how if you use a standalone web tool, it essentially gets amnesia every time you close the tab? It starts fresh every single session. But an AI operating system remembers context across tasks and across time. It knows your firm's tone of voice, it remembers the constraints of a specific project, and it builds on past interactions, so your team doesn't have to endlessly repeat basic instructions. The second component is multi-agent orchestration. Think about a really complex workflow, like onboarding a brand new client. You don't just need one task done, right? You need documents reviewed, data entered, and emails drafted. An AI operating system allows multiple AI agents to work simultaneously on all those different parts of the workflow, and they're all coordinated by a central supervisor layer that makes sure absolutely nothing falls through the cracks. Now, how do we solve that compliance drift we talked about earlier? Well, Components 3 is absolutely crucial: a full action log. In a regulated industry, you just cannot have AI making unrecorded decisions, period. An OS maintains a strict read-only record of every single action an agent takes. You get the exact timestamp, the agent ID, the exact input, the exact output, and crucially, a permanent record of the human who reviewed it. This is exactly how you maintain strict auditability. Component 4 is data sovereignty by design. Look, when you just sign up for random tools online, data sovereignty is an afterthought, if it's even a thought at all. But in an AIOS, where your data is processed is determined before the agents even run. For Australian businesses, that means keeping data onshore, locked safely within the correct legal jurisdiction right from the very first click. And finally, Component 5, a single operational dashboard. Instead of checking 4 different apps to figure out what's happening, leadership gets one unified view. You can see every workflow, monitor every single action, track API costs, and instantly flag any exceptions. It just completely eliminates the fragmentation that causes so many operational headaches in the first place. As a quick side note, at Sunburnt AI, we built Sunny specifically because Australian firms need a platform, not just another tool. All right, moving to Section 3, the Australian data context. We really need to shift our focus to the practical, immediate reality of data sovereignty here, especially for regulated Australian firms. Because listen, this isn't just a technical preference, it's a legal one. If your team pastes a sensitive client brief or a financial summary into an off-the-shelf AI tool, and that vendor's servers happen to sit in Virginia, well, your client's data is being processed in Virginia. For a law firm, a migration agent, or a financial advisor, that is absolutely not a theoretical IT problem. That is a live compliance exposure under the Privacy Act. And look, the stakes have definitely never been higher. 2024 saw some pretty significant Privacy Act amendments that strengthened enforcement and really increased the investigative powers of the OAIC. On top of that, ASIC, APRA, and the Australian Signals Directorate have all made it abundantly clear the accountability for AI-assisted decisions remains entirely with your organization, not with the vendor whose tool you are using. If an offshore tool leaks your data, the regulator is looking directly at you. But hey, don't worry, this is entirely fixable. What does safe implementation actually look like in the real world? It's straightforward, but honestly, it's often skipped. First, do a capability and data audit. You need to know exactly what data you hold and where it flows. Second, establish a clear data processing policy from the top down. Decide in advance which tools are legally allowed to touch which categories of data. And third, build your architecture for auditability right from day one. For Australian businesses, this means insisting on onshore infrastructure, like AWS Sydney or Google Cloud Sydney, so your highly sensitive data literally never leaves Australian legal jurisdiction. Finally, Section 4, the compounding advantage. I want to totally reframe how we think about governance here. Too often, it's seen as a roadblock, right? But it's actually the exact opposite. The organizations that benefit the absolute most from AI over the next few years won't necessarily be the ones who adopted it the fastest, they'll be the ones who built it properly. Businesses that adopt tools informally are just building massive technical debt, but when you invest in governance, proper data architecture, and an AI operating system right at the beginning, you aren't taxing your speed. You are building the very infrastructure that makes scaling sustainable. So I want to challenge you right now to look critically at your current tech stack. Ask yourself, are you just running a collection of AI tools, or are you actually running an AI operating system? What you should really take away from this explainer is that secure AI adoption is a commercial strategy. It's not just a compliance checkbox. To map out your specific workflows and find the governance gaps you might not even realize you have, you can read the full guide at sunburnai.com.au/insights/Australian-AI-operating-system. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll leave you with this one final thought. When you look at your firm's operations 1 year from now, will you be running a synchronized sovereign engine, or will you just be trying to untangle a messy web of risky tools?